Hi, so this is Lauren Cunningham, and I am here with Carrie Land-Steves, who is a member of our clinical team. And we're going to run through some questions to give you a better sense of what the clinical team here at Vera House does. So Carrie, could you tell us, just start out by introducing yourself, a little bit about yourself, what you do here at the organization?
Sure. So like Lauren said, my name is Carrie Land-Steves. I use she, her pronouns. I am the clinical co-director of the therapy program. I don't have a co-director at this time. So it is myself and then another clinician that helped to run the leadership portion of our program right now. When you
And
said a
then,
little bit about myself, Lauren, is there anything else you want to know?
no, that's good. Just
Okay.
while we're on that subject, how many approximately, and I know, staff, numbers fluctuate, but about how many therapists are there on the clinical team?
So we usually have 10 staff clinicians, and we usually have about 4 to 6 master's level clinical interns with us.
Okay. So could be close to a team of about 14, 15 people, it sounds like.
Yes. Yep.
Great. Awesome. So if you could just start out by sharing a little bit about what the clinical program does in the organization, kind of, what the overall goal is, what the services you provide, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So our overall goal is to help survivors to heal from trauma. We have lots of different folks that have had lots of different experiences with interpersonal violence, sexual assault, community violence, homicide survivors. So our hope is to help them heal from those experiences, to increase safety, to decrease symptoms. We use trauma-informed approaches. We are consistently focusing on being client-centered and using evidence-based models. We also really do take a harm reduction standpoint. And what I mean by that is not completely eliminating harm, because we usually know that that's not possible, but being able to decrease some of the harm that folks are experiencing, whether it's from their own sets of symptoms or from some of the relationships around them.
Okay. And so when people think of therapy, think of,
Yeah.
one-on-one counseling, is it short, time limited, or how does that look? Do people sometimes stay connected to the therapy program for a long time?
Yes, we have a lot of variability. So there are some folks that get connected with us that actually just want just one appointment. And so those used to be called a crisis appointment. We now call them an ICS appointment, which stands for immediate connection and support,
Okay.
which is really what it's about. It's about being able to get in the room with another person sooner than later. And so we have some folks that come in for one session. We have some folks that engage with services for about 6 months on average. And then we have folks that are with us for anywhere from about 2 to 5, 6 years.
Okay.
The folks that are
Wow.
usually, the folks that are usually with us a little bit longer, have also typically tapered in how often they're accessing therapy services. So usually it's about every other week or once a month for
Okay.
those folks.
So it might be a little bit more intensive when they first start getting the service and then taper it down as
Yes,
they
that's
go along
correct.
the healing journey. Got it.
Yep.
So could you share with me what a typical day in your department might look like?
Sure. So for most of our clinicians, a typical day, the majority is going to be spent with clients providing therapy services. So typically, clinicians will have kiddos, adults, teens that they're serving. And we have some folks that will go back to back in terms of sessions. And then sometimes, breaks in between to follow up with different, maybe community partners. We make a lot of contact with schools,
Mm-hmm.
CPS workers, just to make sure that we're supporting the folks that we're serving in all the different areas of their lives.
Great. Okay. And so you do individual work, and then is there also some group work that goes on?
Yes. Yes. So typically we have different groups that run. We have a parent informed or a trauma-informed parent group, excuse me. We have a teen group that we often provide, and then we have adult groups that we provide as well. And in addition to groups and the individual work, we do also do a lot of family support and family sessions as well.
Okay. And so that's like working with the family members of people that you're directly serving as a primary client. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. So it can be supporting the supports of the individuals that we're serving, but it can also be like right now we have a family that has 2 kiddos and an adult, and we serve the 2 kiddos and the adult together because the 2 kiddos witnessed the abuse together.
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to really process as a family what the impact has been, processing how that's impacted their relationships with each other and interpersonally. So it's also sometimes for family systems where everybody is a primary client
Okay.
who's experienced the trauma.
Got it. Great.
Yep.
So if you could talk a little bit about who the clinical program serves, because I think a lot of times, we might make assumptions about, who you see or who you don't see. So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see folks starting at about 3 years old and up. We serve folks of all genders and identities and abilities as well. So there are very little limitations in terms of demographics to accessing our services.
Okay. I'm guessing people might be surprised to hear that you serve kids that young. I know for me, It was when I learned that when I first got connected to the organization, but that there is work that you can do even with wee little ones like that.
Yes, wee little ones, and even with folks that are nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when people think of therapy, a lot of the times we think of talk therapy and psychotherapy, which we absolutely utilize in our sessions. And though with youth and kiddos, we use a lot of play-based therapy because play is the main mode of communication for children.
Mm-hmm.
So we really utilize that in looking at boundaries and talking about safety and symptoms, all of those different kind of really important parts of therapy.
Yep. Okay, great. So people of all genders, people of all ages, all sorts of diverse people can be served through the clinical program. Can you now talk a little bit too about the types of trauma that the people you serve are impacted by and how that works in terms of referrals to the clinical program?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think this is one of the questions where we typically have the most confusion. So a lot of folks think Vera House and think, serving sexual violence and serving domestic violence, which we absolutely do, except we have some specific parameters in the clinical program. And so those are, we will serve anyone at any age who has been impacted by sexual violence or is supporting someone that's been impacted by sexual violence. So we do have some adult survivors and we serve their parents, right? Or their grown-ups. So we provide that secondary support. But with domestic violence, we only serve youth, and we characterize youth as being 20 and below.
Okay.
So that could be folks that have been directly impacted by domestic violence, experienced childhood physical abuse, or who have witnessed domestic violence.
Okay. Would that include, like, say, a 16-year-old who has experienced teen dating violence?
Yes.
Okay. So you said 20 and under for people impacted by domestic violence.
Yes, or interpersonal violence. Yes.
Great. Okay. And is there a charge for people that use the clinical service?
No, all of our clinical services are free. We are funded through the agency with donors, as well as through various New York State and federal grants.
So people can come and get, I mean, wow, to hear that people can get therapy over the course of years and it's totally free of charge. That's kind of amazing.
It is, and it increases accessibility for a lot of folks, and also for folks that, for whatever reason, it might be unsafe for that to show up on their insurance. That can be a really significant increase in access because we don't, we don't submit to insurance.
Right. Because if that shows up on an insurance statement, that might not be a safe thing for people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got it. So the last thing with these program interviews that we're doing is we're asking if you could share kind of a case scenario of maybe a situation that was particularly challenging and how that got resolved, or like a success story. So just to give the people listening a little sense of like, okay, what does this work really look like from a like a case scenario perspective?
Yeah. So this question, when I get asked about, what is something, what is something that has been particularly challenging, or, is there a person that stands out that you've served? I often think of this kiddo and youth that I served, starting at about 7 years old. And he was pretty hesitant to engage in therapy, had been just removed from the care of his biological parents, was now in foster care, and then now is coming to see yet another stranger. Even though I think, a lot of times we romanticize maybe what therapy is or can look like, and it's going to be a safe place, and hopefully it is, but that's not often how it feels for youth when they have been through all of these various changes all at once. So I start serving kiddo and start building relationship, and he discloses experiencing harm in the current foster home. I connect with the CPS worker about that. Moves to another foster home, experiences pretty intense physical violence within that foster home. And over the course of our working together, I worked with him until he was about 11, and 10 or 11. And throughout that time, he was placed in 6 different foster homes.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Yes. And so throughout that process, and changed DCFS workers or CPS workers. And so quite literally, I was the only consistent adult in his life, which felt really, really important, but is also incredibly sad. And though he did continue to do an amazing amount of work, we built a really connected relationship with each other. A lot of his symptoms settled. I was able to engage in some co-therapy with another therapist to be able to work through some of the dynamics with him and his brother, who he was not in the same foster home as. We were able to do some work with another sibling who was also in a different foster home. So there's a lot of processing and healing within their history. And the last foster home that he ended up being in then also became his adoptive home. And I had some concerns. This was an entirely white family. This youth was a kiddo of color. I was concerned about their safety with him, their ability to support him. And so I had named this, talked with the county about it. And I was met with a lot of resistance. And I think this is one of the the cases that brings up a lot of emotion for me, because, you know, in our time together, I feel like we did a lot of work together. Um, I felt like there was movement, felt some sense of control in that too. And there were a lot of times with him that I felt really out of control,
Mhm.
even as the person that was supporting him. And that happens. There there are so many things that we can do as providers and as folks providing service. And then there are also sometimes limitations because the systems that we're interacting with. Um, and that's really challenging. Um,
Yeah.
but I was able to go to his adoption. He asked me to be there.
Wow.
Yeah, so went to his adoption and brought him a gift, and um, he was not a kiddo that was overly affectionate, and though asked for a hug
Yeah.
when we said goodbye to each other. And so I still think of him often. It's been 4 years, I think,
Mhm.
since then. But
Wow. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
just a couple other things that come to mind. I hear you talking a lot about kids, and
Yeah.
I don't need like a specific number, but can you give me a guess of about approximately how many out of all the people that you serve in the clinical program, what percentage of that is kids?
Yeah, so we do serve more adults than we do children. Um, but probably about probably about a third right now of the folks that we serve are youth.
Okay, so pretty significant amount.
Yes.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of one other thing that I wonder if it might come up as a question for people. So obviously in the clinical program you serve people that have recently been impacted by sexual violence or by family violence for younger people. But then it also, I heard you mention something earlier. It sounds like that you also serve people that have experienced trauma historically, and so maybe it's not like a recent thing that happened.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that is, especially with the adults that we're serving,
Mhm.
we know uh, it is so hard to disclose.
Mhm.
It is so hard to disclose when something like this has happened, and sexual harm, physical harm, emotional harm, financial harm, all of those things that um, sometimes it takes us a lot of time to be in a place where we can say it out loud. And
Mhm.
so a lot of the adults that we serve are adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse.
Mhm.
And absolutely, so it doesn't, the harm doesn't have to be a current, or like you said, even a recent harm.
Mhm.
um, can be something that happened in their childhood, and they're now a grown up.
Yeah, and so
Or
now they're maybe just finally in a place of being able to feel like they can talk about that and do that work.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we see that happen also really frequently with life cycle changes.
Mhm.
So times that folks, some like times that are folks are survivors who maybe now have their own children, or who experience the loss of a parent,
Mhm.
um, or face another significant life change.
Mhm.
That is often that's often when we see folks re-engaging with us
Kind of a
or starting to engage
catalyst.
with us. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Great. Well, this has been incredibly informative, Carrie. And hopefully this gives people a better sense of what the clinical program does, and um, knowing that there's a team of clinicians out there when we're on agency orientation, we know that there's a whole group of people that if there's more questions, they can always reach out and ask.
Absolutely, they can. Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank you
bye.
for having me.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.